Hey boys and girls, I'm here with our possibly last read aloud. If I don't get through to the end, I will just, I'll post a bonus read aloud. So let's begin. Chapter 55, A Stone Squirrel. When he was finished, Flora's mother stood over his shoulder, reading and nodding and saying, that's right, that ought to do it. There are a few misspellings, but then you're a squirrel. Of course you're going to misspell things. She lit another cigarette and leaned against the kitchen table, considering him. I guess it's time, she said. Wait here, I'll be right back. And he did as she said. He waited. She left the kitchen, and he simply sat there, unmoving. It was as if she had put a spell on him. It was as if typing the lies, the wrong words, had depleted him of the ability to act. Once, long ago, in a garden in springtime, Ulysses had seen a squirrel made of stone, gray, hollow-eyed, frozen. In his stone paws, he held a stone acorn that he would never get to consume. That squirrel was probably still in the garden right now, still holding that acorn, still waiting. I am a stone squirrel, thought Ulysses. I can't move. He looked over at the words he typed. They were untrue words. Several of them misspelled. There was no joy in them, no love, and worst of all, they were words that hurt Flora. He turned slowly. He sniffed his tail, and as he sniffed, he remembered the words that Flora had shouted at him in the giant donut. Remember who you are! You're Ulysses! The helpful advice had been followed by a single, powerful word. Act. He heard the sound of footsteps. What should I do? What action should I take? He should type. He should type a word. But what word? All right. Now, before we move on to chapter 56, pause this. There's going to be a picture. Go look at the picture, and it's going to say chapter 55 picture, or chapter 55. So go look at that picture, and then unpause, come back. Chapter 56, Kidnapped. She woke with a start. The house was incredibly dark, so dark that Flora wondered if she'd gone temporarily blind. Ulysses? She said. She sat up and stared in the direction of the door. Slowly, the rectangular outline of it appeared, and she could see that it was ajar, meaning slightly opened. Ulysses, she said again. She got out of bed and went down the darkened stairs, past the little shepherdess. You stupid lamp, she said. She made her way into the kitchen. It was empty. The typewriter was unmanned, or unsquirreled. Ulysses? She walked over to the typewriter and saw a piece of paper glowing white in the dim light. Uh-oh, she said. She leaned in close. She squinted. Dear Flora, I am terribly fond of you, but I hear the call of the wild, and I must return to my natural habitat. Thank you for the macaroni and cheese. Yours, Mr. Squirrel. Mr. Squirrel. Call of the wild, terribly fond. It was the biggest lie that Flora had ever read in her life. It didn't look like Ulysses had written it at all. Only at the very end did the truth appear. 2 letters, F and L. That was Ulysses, trying to type her name one last time, trying to tell her that he loved her. I love you too, she whispered to the paper. And then, looking around the kitchen. She looked around the kitchen. What kind of cynic was she, whispering, I love you, to a squirrel who wasn't even there? But she did love him. She loved his whiskers, she loved his words, she loved his happiness, his little head, his determined heart, his nutty breath. She loved how beautiful he looked when he flew. She felt her heart seize up. Why hadn't she told him that? She should have said those words to him. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was finding him. Flora hadn't been reading The Criminal Element for 2 solid years for nothing. She knew what was going on. The squirrel had been kidnapped by her mother. She took a deep breath. She considered what to do, what action to take. In the event of a true and genuine emergency, an absolute and undeniable crime, the authorities must be notified immediately, says the criminal element. Flora was certain that this was a true and genuine emergency and an absolute, undeniable crime. Still, it didn't seem like a good idea to notify the authorities. If she called the police, what would she say? My mother kidnapped my squirrel? The criminal element says, if for some reason the authorities are not accessible to you, you must seek help in other quarters. Whom do you trust? Whom do you know to be safe in a storm? Flora suddenly remembered her dream and how warm William Spiver's hand had felt in her own. She blushed. Whom did she trust? Good grief. She trusted William Spiver. Chapter 57. Tootie to the rescue. It was 2:20 a.m. The grass was heavy with dew. Flora was picking her way through the darkness. She was breathing heavily because she was carrying Mary Ann in her arms, and Mary Ann, for all of her pink cheeks and delicate features and excessive frilliness, was extremely heavy. Incredibly heavy. Talk about stout, thought Flora. The criminal element says, can one reason with a criminal? This is debatable, but it is true that the rules of nursery school are often in good effect in the criminal world. What do we mean by this? We mean that if the criminal has something you want, then you must have something he wants. Only then is it possible for a discussion to begin. There was nothing and no one that Flora's mother loved more than that lamp. Together, Flora and William Spiver would find her mother. They would offer to exchange the little shepherdess for the squirrel, and then all would be well. Or something. That was Flora's plan, but first she had to find William Spiver, and she didn't think it would be a good idea to ring Tootie's doorbell at 2:20 a.m. William Spiver! Here she was, standing in the dark, holding an unlit lamp and hoping that a temporarily blind boy would hear her calling his name and come help her rescue a squirrel. A squirrel who, for a superhero, sure did seem to need a lot of rescuing. Things were pretty grim. William Spiver, she said. William Spiver? And then, without even intending to, she started saying William Spiver's name over and over, louder and louder. William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver! There was no way he would be able to hear her, of course, she knew that, but she couldn't make herself stop. She just stupidly, hopefully, kept saying the same name. Florabelle? William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver! Florabelle. William Spiver, William Spiver, William Spiver! Florabelle! And there he was, standing at a darkened window, conjured apparently by her need and desperation, and her words. William Spiver, or at least the shadow of William Spiver. Oh, said Flora. Hello. Well, hello to you too, said William Spiver. How lovely of you to visit in the middle of the night. There's been an emergency, said Flora. All right, said William Spiver. Just let me put on my bathrobe. Flora felt a familiar prick of irritation. It's an emergency, William Spiver. There's no time to waste. Forget your bathrobe. I'll just put on my bathrobe, said William Spiver, as if she hadn't said anything at all. I'll be right there. Wherever there is. It is shockingly difficult to locate even the most obvious things when one is temporarily blind. The world is hard to navigate when you can't see. Although, to be perfectly frank, I had trouble navigating the world even before the blindness. I've never been what you would call coordinated or spatially intelligent. It's not even that I bump into things. It's more that things leap out of nowhere and bump into me. My mother says this is because I live in my head as opposed to the world. But I ask you, don't we all live in our heads? Where else would we possibly exist? Our brains are like the universe. Don't you think that's true, Florabelle? I said it's an emergency. Well then, I'll just put on my bathrobe and we'll sort all this out. Flora put Mary Ann down on the ground. She looked around wildly in the darkness. What was she looking for? She didn't know. Maybe a stick she could use to hit William Spiver over the head? Florabelle? Ulysses is gone, she said. My mother kidnapped him. I think my mother's possessed. I think she might hurt him. Do not cry, she told herself. Do not cry. Do not hope. Do not cry. Just observe. Shh, said William Spiver. It's okay, Florabelle. I'll help you. We'll find him. And then the light in William Spiver's room came on, and Tootie said, What in the world are you doing, William? Looking for my bathrobe. Tootie to the rescue. The words appeared above Tootie's head in a kind of neon brightness. Tootie, shouted Flora, it's an emergency. Flora, said Tootie. She stuck her head out the window. Why do you have that awful lamp? It's complicated, said Flora. Again with the lamp, said William Spiver. What in the world is the meaning of that lamp? My mother loves the lamp, said Flora, and I'm holding it hostage. Desperate times call for desperate measures, said Tootie. That's right, said Flora. It's an emergency. I'll just get my purse, said Tootie. I'll post a picture from that chapter too. Chapter 58. Nothing personal. It was dark. Very, very dark. And there was the smell of smoke. Flora's mother had him in a sack, and the sack was flung over her back. And she was walking somewhere, and it was very, very dark. At the last minute, Flora's mother had picked up a piece of paper with his poem on it and thrown it into the sack along with him. Was this meant as a kindness? Was she mocking him? Or was she covering her tracks? The squirrel didn't know, but he held the crumpled ball of paper to his chest and tried to comfort himself. He thought, Worse things have happened to me. There was the time that the pickup truck had run over his tail. That hurt very much. And then there was also the incident with the BB gun, and the teddy bear, and the garden hose, the slingshot, the bow and arrow. But everything that had happened before paled in comparison, because there was so much more to lose now. Flora, her round, lovable head, cheese puffs, poetry, giant donuts. Shoot, he was going to leave the world without ever trying a giant donut. And Tootie said she was going to read poetry to him. That would never happen now either. It was very dark in the sack. It was very dark everywhere. I'm going to die, thought the squirrel. He hugged his poem close, and the paper crackled and sighed. This is nothing personal, Mr. Squirrel, said Flora's mother. Ulysses held himself very still. He found this hard to believe. It really has nothing to do with you, said Flora's mother. It's about Flora, Florabelle. She's a strange child, and the world is not kind to strange people. She was strange before, and she's stranger now. Now she's walking around with a squirrel on her shoulder. Talking to a squirrel, talking to a typing, flying squirrel. Not good at all. Was Flora strange? He supposed so, but what was wrong with that? He was strange in a good way. She was strange in a lovable way. Her heart was so big, it was capacious, just like George Buckman's heart. Do you know what I want? Said Flora's mother. Ulysses couldn't imagine. I just want things to be normal. I want a daughter who is happy. I want her to have friends who aren't squirrels. I don't want her to end up unloved and all alone in the world. But that doesn't matter, does it? It does matter, thought Ulysses. It's time to do what needs to be done, said Flora's mother. She stopped walking. Uh-oh, thought Ulysses. Chapter 59, Destination Unknown. Tootie was driving, if that's what you would call it. She did not have her hands at 10 and 2. She did not have her hand at any o'clock. Basically, Tootie drove with one finger on the wheel. Flora's father would have been appalled. They were in the front seat, all four of them, Tootie, Marianne, Flora, and William Spiver. They were speeding down the road. It was alarming and exhilarating to be going so fast. "So, your plan is to have an exchange?" said William Spiver. "The lamp for a squirrel?" "Yes," said Flora, "but correct me if I'm wrong, we have no idea where the squirrel and your mother are." Flora hated the phrase, "correct me if I'm wrong." In her experience, people only said it when they knew they were right. "Ulysses!" Flora shouted out of her open window. "Ulysses!" Flora could see the squirrel's name, Ulysses, flying out of the car and into the night. A single, beautiful word that was immediately swallowed by the wind and the darkness. Her heart clenched. Why hadn't she told that squirrel she loved him? "I hate to be the voice of reason," said William Spiver. "Don't be then," said Flora. "But aren't we speeding down the road? We are speeding, aren't we, Great Aunt Tootie? Surely we are exceeding the speed limit." "I don't see a posted speed limit," said Tootie. She hollered Ulysses' name. "In any case," said William Spiver, "it seems we're going extremely fast. And we're speeding to where, exactly? We don't know. We are en route to an unknown destination, calling out the name of a missing squirrel. It doesn't seem one bit rational." "Well, what's your idea?" said Flora. "What's your plan?" "Well, we should try to think of where your mother could have taken him. We should be logical and methodical, scientific." "Ulysses!" shouted Tootie. "Ulysses!" screamed Flora. "Saying his name won't make him appear," said William Spiver. But saying William's name over and over had made him appear. This, Flora knew from Terrible Things Can Happen to You, was magical thinking, or mental causation. According to Terrible Things, it was a dangerous way to think. It was dangerous to allow yourself to believe that what you said directly influenced the universe. But sometimes it did, didn't it? "Do not hope," Flora thought. But she couldn't help it. She did hope. She was hoping. She'd been hoping all along. "Ulysses!" she shouted. The car slowed down. "Oh, what now?" said William Spiver. "Have we spotted something squirrel-related?" Tootie used a single finger to steer the car to the side of the road. "Let me guess," said William Spiver as they coasted to a stop. "We've run out of gas." "We've run out of gas," said Tootie. Oh, the symbolism. Why, Flora wondered, had she ever thought William Spiver could help her? Why had she thought of him as her safe port in a storm? Was it because he held her hand in a stupid dream? Or was it because he never stopped talking and she couldn't give up on the idea that he might actually say something that was helpful? Talk about magical thinking. "Where are we?" said Flora to Tootie. "I'm not entirely certain," said Tootie. "Great," said William Spiver. "We're lost. Not that we knew where we were going to begin with." "We'll just have to walk," said Tootie. "Obviously," said William Spiver. "But walk where?" Okay. In Chapter 59, I'm posting a picture as well. Chapter 60. He was Ulysses. They were in the woods. He could tell by the smell of pine resin in the trees and the sound of pine needles crunching underfoot. Also, there was the powerful, extremely pervasive scent of raccoon. Raccoons owned the night, and raccoons were truly terrifying creatures, more brutal even than cats. "This will do," said Flora's mother. She stopped and put the sack on the ground, and then she opened it and shone a bright light on Ulysses. He clutched his poem to his chest. He stared into the light as bravely as he could. "Give me that," said Flora's mother. She pulled the paper out of his paws and threw it to the ground. Would she never get tired of flinging his words away? "This is the end of the road, Mr. Squirrel," she said. She put the flashlight on the ground. She picked up a shovel. The shovel. He heard Flora's voice. "Remember who you are." The squirrel turned and sniffed his tail. He thought about when Flora had shown him the picture of Alfred T. Slipper in his janitor uniform, and how Alfred had been transformed into the bright light of Incandesto. The words of the poem that Tootie had recited rose up inside of him. Flare up like a flame. All right. The rest of this chapter is a comic, so pause, go read it, and come back. Chapter 61. I want to go home. You can navigate by the North Star, supposedly. Moss grows on the north side of trees, or so they say. If you are lost in the woods, you should stay where you are and someone will find you. Maybe. These were the things that Flora had learned about being lost, in Terrible Things Can Happen to You. Not that any of it was relevant here. They weren't lost in the woods. They were lost in the universe, which, according to William Spiver, was expanding. How comforting. Ulysses, shouted Tootie. Ulysses, shouted Flora. It's pointless, said William Spiver. Flora was carrying Mary Ann, and William Spiver was holding on to Tootie's shoulder. Flora hated to agree with William Spiver, but pointless seemed like an appropriate word. Her arms ached from carrying the little shepherdess. Her feet hurt. Her heart hurt. Let's see, said Tootie, peering into the darkness. That's Bricknell Road up there, so we're not truly lost. I wish I could see, said William Spiver in a sad voice. You can see, said Tootie. Great Aunt Tootie, said William Spiver. I hate to point out the obvious, but I will do it here for the sake of clarity. You are not me. You do not exist behind my traumatized eyeballs. I am telling the truth. My truth. I cannot see. There is nothing wrong with you, William. How many times do I have to tell you that? Why did she send me away then? Said William Spiver. His voice shook. You know why they sent you away. I do. You can't just push someone's truck into a lake, said Tootie. It was a pond, said William Spiver. A very small pond. More of a sinkhole, actually. You cannot totally submerge someone's vehicle in a body of water, said Tootie in a loud voice, and expect there are not going to be consequences. I did it out of anger, said William Spiver. I admitted immediately it was an unfortunate decision. Tootie shook her head. You pushed a truck into a lake. You pushed a truck into a lake? Said Flora. How did you do that? I released the parking brake, he said, and I put the truck in drive. That's enough, said Tootie. We don't need a how to push a truck into a lake lecture. Sinkhole, said William. It was a sinkhole. Wow, said Flora. Why did you do it? It was my revenge upon Tyrone, said William Spiver. My name is William. William Spiver, not Billy. He said Billy one too many times, and I cracked. I pushed Tyrone's truck into the sinkhole, and when my mother found out, she was incandescent with rage. I looked upon her rage, and you know what happened? I was blinded by disbelief and sorrow. He shook his head. I'm her son, but she made me leave. She sent me away. Even in the darkness, Flora could see the tears crawling out from under William Spiver's dark glasses. I want to be called William Spiver, he said. I want to go home. Flora felt her heart lurch inside of her. I want to go home. It was another one of William's sad, beautiful sentences. But will you return? I came looking for you. I want to go home. Flora realized that she wanted to go home too. She wanted things to be the way they were before she was banished. She put Mary Ann down on the ground. Give me your hand, she said. What? Give me your hand, said Flora again. My hand? Why? Flora reached out and grabbed hold of William Spiver's hand, and he held on to her. It was as if he were drowning and she were standing on solid ground. According to terrible things, drowning people were desperate out of their minds with fear. In their panic, they could pull you, the rescuer, under the water if you weren't careful. So Flora held on tightly to William Spiver, and he held tightly back. It was just like her dream. She was holding William Spiver's hand, and he was holding hers. "Well, if you two are going to walk holding hands," said Tootie, "I suppose I'll be the one who carries this monstrosity of a lamp." Above them, the stars were shining brighter than Flora had ever seen them shine. "I wish my father was here," said William Spiver. He wiped at the tears on his face with his free hand. An image of Flora's father, hands in his pocket, hat on his head, smiling and saying, "Holy Bagumba!" and the voice of Dolores rose up in Flora's mind. Her father. She wanted to see his face. She loved him. "I know where we should go," said Flora. Okay, another chapter that's all comics, so chapter 62. Go find that chapter and then come back. All right. Actually, I'm going to stop this video so it won't take too long to upload, and then we'll have our grand finish later. I'll either post it today or tomorrow, depending on when it uploads. Okay?